Okay, let's start with the basics of React. Simply put, React is a library set of tools specifically designed for building user interfaces, or what you see and interact with on websites. It's been heavily supported by Facebook, now Meta, and it's become incredibly widespread because of its strengths. The key idea behind React is the concept of components. These components are like little reusable building blocks. A button might be one component, an input field another. They allow you to break down large applications into smaller, manageable pieces, making them much easier to develop and maintain. React also uses something called a virtual DOM, which makes updates super efficient. It only changes the parts of the screen that need to be updated, instead of rebuilding the whole thing every time. Okay, so when it comes to React, one of the first things you'll want to know is its fundamental approach. It's built around the idea of reusable components, like building with Lego bricks. These components make your code much more organized and easier to maintain. Then there's the virtual DOM, which is a clever trick that helps React update the user interface efficiently. Finally, JSX lets you write HTML-like syntax inside JavaScript, making it really easy to see how your UI looks at a glance. Okay, let's talk about JSX. JSX is essentially a special way of writing HTML within your React code. It's not actually HTML itself, it's a syntax extension to JavaScript. It makes writing UI components much more readable and easier to work with. Basically, you write out how you want your component to look, almost like regular HTML, but it gets translated into actual JavaScript instructions for React to build the user interface. Okay, let's talk about defining React component. Essentially, a component is like a little self-contained piece of your user interface, a building block you can reuse throughout your app. You usually define them using JavaScript functions, and the most common way now is with functional components. These are just regular JavaScript functions that return JSX. JSX lets you write HTML-like code inside your JavaScript, making it easier to think about how your UI should look. It's a really powerful concept for building complex applications in a structured way. Okay, let's talk about a fundamental difference between how we build components in React functional vs. class components. Class components were the standard way to go for quite some time, using JavaScript classes and having a render method. They handled state with something called this state and utilized lifecycle methods like component demand, which helped manage things when a component was first loaded or removed from the screen. However, React now strongly encourages the use of functional components. These are just regular JavaScript functions. They're generally more concise and easier to read, especially for simpler logic. Functional components often use something called hooks like useState and useEffect to manage state and handle side effects. Think things like fetching data or setting up timers. Essentially, functional components provide a more streamlined approach and are becoming the preferred way to build React applications. Okay, let's talk about props in React. Props are essentially how you give data down the component tree. Imagine you have a parent component that needs to display information about a child component. You can send this information to the child as props, which are like arguments for functions. They're read-only inside the child, so they're perfect for making components reusable and adaptable. For example, you might pass a name or an ID, anything that helps the child component know what to display or do. Okay, let's talk about state in React. State is basically the internal data that a component holds. It's what makes your components dynamic and responsive. Unlike props, which are like instructions passed from parent to child, state lies inside the component itself. When the state changes, React kicks in and re-renders everything to show you those updates. It's super useful for things like handling user input, changing content based on conditions, or even controlling how a component behaves. Think of toggling buttons or updating information as the component responds. Okay, so let's talk about this really important piece of React, the virtual DOM. Basically, React doesn't just jump straight into updating your website's visual display whenever something changes in your data. Instead, it creates a copy virtual version of what your screen should look like. This virtual version is super lightweight and fast to work with. When you make a change in your application, React compares the new virtual DOM with the existing one, figuring out precisely what needs to be updated on the real screen. It only does those minimal updates, which makes React incredibly efficient and snappy even with complex applications.